And then we have a couple of guests with us today. There's also a, some newer commission members as well. So you may not have been in the space with some of these guests as well, but for the good of the order, let's just go around and introduce ourselves. I know that it might help Alicia. Thanks, Alicia, for supporting, providing admin support to our group. But yeah, let's just go ahead and do name, pronouns if you'd like to share, and then we haven't chatted in a while, y'all. If you want to share anything fun that you might have done this summer or something super chill, but I'll go ahead and kick us off and then we'll just popcorn style. How about that? And go ahead and include our guests as well if you want to popcorn to them. But Daniela Altamirano Hernandez, I use they, he, él pronouns. I'm chair of the commission, and this summer was a really chill one for me, which is why I included that option. Here in Central Oregon, our summers were taken over by wildfires. And so typically I spend a lot of the time outside, but I spent a lot of the time inside, protecting myself from the smoke, but still tried to get out there as much as possible. But good to see everyone, and I'll popcorn it over to Susan.
Thanks, Daniel. It's good to see everyone. I'm Susan Taylor. Pronouns are she, her. Um, Something chill. Daniel, I was thinking about how I'm in Central Oregon too, and I have had to evacuate twice in the last year. So that's great. So not super chill, but the rest of the time that it has been chill, my neighborhood has a pool, and my 14-year-old son has wanted to go night swimming. So after dinner, he and I will go to the pool and hang out. And he asks me really thoughtful questions like, what made you want to be a grant writer? And, he's almost, in high school. So he's like at that age where he's never going to talk to me for the next like 4 or 5 years. So that's my sweet that's my sweet time right now with my boy, and I'm holding on to that every moment I can. I'll pass it off to Cassie.
Thanks, Susan. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Cassie Rose. I am an AmeriCorps Seniors Project Director at the southern end of the state, working in Jackson, Josephine, Klamath, and Douglas counties. And happy to be here for the voice of our seniors. Let's see. I relate to everything Susan just said about her teenage boy, but I will highlight that we just got to go to the under 20 World Championship track meet at Hayward Field last weekend. I got to watch a bunch of young men from America break the world record in the 4x100. And we bought finish line tickets, so my son was thrilled, and he spoke to me, Susan, for like a good 20 minutes. It was awesome. So it's been a fun summer, and track and field's his passion. So love that. Happy to be a track mom. Oh, Julie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Nash. Oh, did you say June or Julie? I'm sorry.
Julie,
Okay,
go.
sorry. I seen June pop up and then I went, oh. So I am the Deputy Regional Administrator that gets the pleasure of covering the West region, and obviously Oregon is part of that. And I use she, her pronouns. This summer, we've had a pretty kind of chill summer as well. I enjoy camping with my family, so we've had the opportunity to do a family camping trip, which was a ton of fun. I will, being as I referenced June, I will popcorn it over to June.
And I just arrived. So what are we introducing self?
I got you, June. We have a couple guests in the room, and also our commission has been through a lot of recent change. So we're just doing round of introductions with name, pronouns, and anything you'd like to share from this summer, since it's been a while since we've seen each other. Anything from maybe something super fun or something really chill.
Great. So my name is June Bass, and I'm with Portland Parks and Recreation up in the Portland area, city of Portland. And for this summer, I think one of the really fun things about living in the metro area is there's a lot of opportunities to do lots of fun things in parks. This is our season. So we have concerts and movies and free lunch and play and fitness in the park and open swim throughout the city of Portland. And so I have been going to a lot of concerts and some other events like that. They're all free and open to the public. In fact, tonight, one of the programs is Comedy in the Park at Laurelhurst Park. For so any of you that have been in the Portland area, it's a great event, fun, free event to attend.
I will be there. I forgot to mention we're popcorning, so I'll help you out, June.
Oh,
I will
thank
be
you.
there. I'll be there because I'm in Portland this weekend. So funny you
Yay.
mentioned it. I see Greg on my screen.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Greg Corpinello. These he, him pronouns. I am based out of Milwaukee, Oregon, so just south of Portland. I'm the executive director of Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. We're an AmeriCorps National Direct grantee. Happy to be here. I'm going to go the opposite of chill. So we just had orientation for our new volunteers, and it was supposed to be up on Mount Hood, a place called Camp Arawanda. And we got there and quickly realized that we needed to move. So it was a fun exercise to get 120 people off of the mountain and to a new place. So thankfully, we had some friends at the University of Portland who were able to accommodate us for our week-long orientation. So that was interesting. I'm going to pass it over to Danny. Would you like to go next?
Hi, Danny. He, him. I don't know if anything chill happened, but sort of close to chill. I have ran into like three childhood best friends, that I haven't talked to in like a good like 10 years. So I was like 12 years old. And I'm now hanging out. Like it was all like back to back in like 2 weeks. And it's like let's be friends again. But it's because you've already been friends. You don't have to go through that like weird like friend cycle. It kind of feels like you just go from like not knowing somebody to like, oh yeah, we're gonna hang out like this weekend and I already know like your family and like everybody else. Like it's pretty cool. And I will pass to did Amber go?
I haven't. Amber Martignon, nice to join you all. I am with ILPC Consulting, but I also wear other hats. I'm also with America's Service Commissions. And going to talk a little bit about the Service to Career Project today. My pronouns are she, her. And my summer has not been chill. I have probably been in DC 5 times in the last 2 months for meetings. But I did get to go to the National Governors Association meeting where we announced the Service United Fund. So that was not chill, but it was very fun. If I can pass it on to Mary.
Thanks, Amber. Mary Grussel, she, her pronouns. I am located actually in Southern California, and I serve as the ex officio member on this board with AmeriCorps. Thinking about my summer, I live close to the county fair, so we have been county fairing it up lately, and it is closing this weekend, so we're headed there tonight for our final walk around. So. Let me look and see. Miranda, have you gone yet?
I have not. Thanks, Mary. That sounds fun. Hi, everybody. I'm Rhonda Scheiding, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Deputy Director of Workforce at the HEC. And I have also had a not chill summer. We've been really busy seeing music and doing lots of things. And probably the least not chill thing that I did was I just got back from Portugal a couple weeks ago, and that was amazing. I went and met some friends of mine, and we walked around a lot. We rented a car, we drove everywhere, and we ate just phenomenal food and practiced our really poor Portuguese language skills. So it was really fun. Dr. Latrissa.
Hey everybody, Dr. Latricia Lee Nyworth. I'm here in Portland, the Chief Academic Officer and the Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Warren Pacific. Not a chill summer, unfortunately for me. We have had, which is good news, a new president that we've just hired. So I'm helping onboard her. She's from Ohio, from Malone University. So she's just moved out here with her family, Dr. Christina Schneider's. I'm also being tasked with convening the inauguration. So that is a huge deal, and that will be in October, and ours starts in 2 weeks. So I'm going to be multitasking here because I've got so many things to do, and our budget's due today, and we're having to cut it. So yeah, so that's just life over here in higher ed, you know. So anyway, it's good to be here and see you all.
Carrie, I believe you are gonna finish us out for introductions, and then also Alicia, if they would like to say hello. We already kind of did that, but they are welcome.
Alicia, do you want to go?
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. My name is Alicia Straight. I'm an office support specialist at the HEC. I'm actually pretty new. I've only been here for about 3 months. I normally support Oregon YouthWorks, but as Kelly's away, I'm supporting this team as well. And yeah, I'm really happy and excited to be here. As for the summer, it's been pretty chill. I went whale watching about a month ago, in Depot Bay, and it was really fun. It was really relaxing.
I've done that before. That is really fun. That's exciting. All right, I'll close this out. Carrie Bauer, Director, OregonServes, she, her. I have been doing a lot of hiking and camping so far, which has been really nice. I managed to squeeze a lot of that in before it got pretty smoky. Um, uh, I am just loving it. I did the other weekend, I hiked both Horsetail Falls and Beacon Rock, two hikes in two different states in one day. It was, but they're pretty close together though, so that's not that impressive. I also, yeah, I've just been doing a lot of hikes from like my neighborhood up to like the Rose Garden, and as part of kind of my self-care and stuff. I did do a 6 mile hike in Forest Park trying to go to Pittock Mansion, but I got lost. I never made it to Pittock Mansion. I turned around because they have the worst signage in that park. You walk up and it's like Wildwood Trail, and there's an arrow going left and an arrow going right. And I was making guesses and didn't work out. But it was still a fun time. And then yeah, like did some camping out at Oxbow, which was also really fun. I can't wait to go back there. I had never been there. And then just on the theme of what June was talking about, I've been taking advantage of the free concerts. I just was at the Washington Park, who does have good signage. I don't get lost there. I was just at their free like jazz concert Sunday night. I don't know if that is part of Portland parks or not, okay, it is. Yeah, it was really, really, really fun. And it was packed. It was packed. And I just thought that was so exciting to see that. And yeah, I really loved it. Just laying on the hill on the grass, listening to music. That's such a cool thing that the city does. And there's not enough like free things that happen, so I really love that, to see stuff like that. And so yeah, I've just been trying to be outdoors and like listen to music and hike and do all that stuff, because when it comes to like the rest of the stuff going on and work and everything else, it's been a bit bonkers, as you're going to hear about. Lots of opportunities, but lots of things going on. So it's been that's kind of been my balance I've been finding, is just doing a lot of hiking and stuff like that. So pretty chill.
I love it. Thanks for uh, summarizing it very well, by saying that I heard a lot of folks balancing a lot of things, but also finding maybe a little bit of chill, maybe a little bit of fun, and a little bit of everything in between. It's good to see everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with our business. I don't believe we have public comment today. Looking at Alicia and Carrie for confirmation, so we can just pass
We do not. And I do just want to very quickly mention, as I said in the chat, which I think you saw, that we do have quorum. And thanks for giving me a second to recalculate that, because I did want to make a quick note that, or announcement, that Jared has resigned from the commission. And so I need to recalculate too based on that number. There's been a lot going on at work and
Yep.
some other things that he's been appointed to, so he needed to step off. But we will follow up, and continue. Obviously thanked him for his service, and we'll make sure to recognize him. But he said thank you, and he really enjoyed it, and goodbye to everybody. So just wanted to share that quick announcement.
Gotcha. Thank you for that update. And yes, many thanks for Jared's service. And I'm sure we will cross paths again one day. No public comment today. We do need to approve last meeting's minutes. As Carrie mentioned, it was attached in the email that went out. If it all looks good and someone has reviewed it, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I would second that.
Okay, Dr. Latricia puts forward a motion. Is there a second to Dr. Latricia's?
I'll second that.
Awesome. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, those meeting minutes are approved. If anyone also has anything to add to today's agenda, that would be the time to share that. If not, we'll just move forward as presented. And the first thing that we have, or before we go to Carrie's director report, I'm looking at time and we're pretty good, but opening the floor for any commissioner announcements. I know that one of the ones that I wanted to share, and it might be within Carrie's report, but I have shared in the past, I sit on the Ask National Board. And one of the exciting announcements that we have is that there is a new CEO at the national level, which is very exciting because Kyra has done so much work to get the organization to where it is today. And a new CEO will bring in new energy, but continue that same momentum. And it's someone from within the network. And so that's really exciting for someone who knows the work and has done really good work at their own individual state level. But just wanted to mention that's one of the most exciting things among many other updates happening at the national level regarding budgeting process, continuing resolutions, just continued policy work happening in DC, but I think it's really cool. This doesn't happen every year. It's probably going to be a while for this to happen again. So just wanted to share that. And I will pass the floor over to Carrie for all the things.
All the things. All right, let me fumble around with slideshow and screen shares and things for a second, as I always forget where to start from. So let's see. Okay. Are you seeing
Yep.
just the slides?
Just the slides.
That is working? Okay.
Yes, you're good.
All right. So my director's report today, it's kind of morphed just even over the last week because so many developments have happened just in the last several days. Exciting developments, ongoing, dynamic, shifting things. I would say that the theme of today's meeting is really going to be sharing about all of these different things that are going on. And as you'll see with like one of my last slides, kind of asking you all to think about kind of where we go with some of this. There's a lot going on, a lot of, like I said, really exciting announcements, but some things where it really is going to require us to kind of like hone in and really like target our activities. And so instead of kind of doing my typical like things like, yes, this person, and also, by the way, Daniel, you didn't mention who the new Ask director was.
That was totally my bad. And I was reading the comment that was just added, but it's John Kelly. And he was with Serve Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
I always say Colorado John, exactly. And sometimes I might do things like that, like, yeah, this is the new person hired, and this is, the recent thing with the federal budget and stuff like that. There's not much more to kind of report from that new, and so this is really just about kind of these kind of, I think, setting the premise, the context for what we're going to hear from Amber and some of the things that we need to talk about. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of start with to set this conversation up, is just talk a little bit about kind of where we've been, the background, what we've been focusing on and prioritizing. And I think that for most of you, that a big thing that we've been doing is really exploring how national service could take a more, and especially within our activities, our grant making, our partnership building, how that can really take a more prominent role in addressing community needs, providing pathways into some of these like high demand careers, seeing where there could be more alignment with credentials. I know I kind of wrote this as like, over the past year, we've been doing this. We know that, and we've always been promoting that national service and volunteer service are pathways to careers and educational fulfillment and whatnot. But this has been a little bit more of kind of a really specific focus in aligning with the governor's priorities, which includes addressing some workforce shortages, one of them being with climate action, with being youth mental behavioral health. And so we kind of, rather than more broadly focusing on grant making in lots of different ways, we've really been focusing on how we can play a role in that part. And that included participating in the National Governors Association, excuse me, Service Career Policy Academy, which was a $50,000 grant that we got. We focused, as I said, really particularly on where we could align national service and leverage our federal, AmeriCorps funding with private funding, addressing behavioral health and climate related pathways. We we used some of that. We got the $500,000 grant from the Schultz Family Foundation and Pinterest to be able to launch the Youth Mental Health Corps. So I think we're one of, I think it's now up to 30 states that are doing that. Sort of like a second year pilot, I guess. So we've done a lot of really focusing on that and elevating that work and getting that going. And of course, that's been a real kind of up and down. That's been a roller coaster because, as we know, there's been quite a lot going on externally that had impacted our timelines or even just like the makeup of our partnerships and our grant making portfolio. We are involved in that multi-state lawsuit about our canceled grants. We had a complete portfolio turnover. In fact, some of our, grantees are not operating anymore, not operating AmeriCorps anymore. So we've really just had like a lot of different things going on. But happy to say that, we've just had a lot of interest in these programs, and we're rebuilding that portfolio and those partnerships and whatnot. And one of the things that has been, something as we've been thinking, where do we go with all of this? What became important for us is kind of learning more too about what the context and the landscape was out there. And so just kind of pulling back, then we used some of that funding from the Service to Career Policy Academy grant to engage a consultant, who is Amber, to examine, Oregon's landscape, the opportunities, what are the barriers out there, what are those silos and duplications that we need to deal with, what are these places where there's gaps and needs that we are, uniquely could fill. And so then with that, what would be great strategies? What kind of policy, what kind of legislative actions could we take? And so that work is what you are going to hear about later in this meeting from Amber. And so why this is such a big topic is that as we have been just doing that and laying that groundwork for establishing and expanding Youth Mental Health Corps and looking at these different ways that we could fill in in this and be a primary partner within that work in the state. There's been a lot going on at the same time. So we know that we've got Youth Mental Health Corps happening. We also, I'm going to tell you about something that just got launched last week, which is the Service United initiative. That is a really amazing initiative that is going to provide additional funding for, basically state service corps positions. Then, haven't really shared this too broadly. This just got announced. I haven't put it out in like press release or anything like that because we are having a meeting next week to learn a little bit more about this. But we've actually been meeting. I just saw, Alicia, that Hillary joined this meeting on the Teams. If somebody could message her and make sure she joins via Zoom instead. I just got to pop up for that. So we were reached out to through our partners at Schultz by Kaiser Permanente, who said we actually really want to invest in youth mental health corps and make sure that this continues, that there's sustainability, that there isn't this, funding cliff that happens after this private grant goes away. And we want to do that in partnership with you and OHA. So we've actually been having meetings with them, and it's been really great. Amber's come in for those too. Executives have flown in from LA for this, and they've announced that California, Oregon, and another state are going to be the three states that they are going to invest $10 million in for expansion of youth mental health corps. So that's pretty exciting stuff. I do not have any further details about that. We are still figuring all that out and kind of figure out where that's going to go, but we have a commitment from them that they really want to expand that work and expand this programming. And so hopefully more news on that soon. But as I said, until we kind of like get into a little bit more of the details, we haven't done necessarily like any sort of PR or anything for that, but we will soon. But that's very exciting. But generally, just the takeaway is that this service to career pathway, I mean, we've been doing this the whole time, right? Even before there was a label, we all started assigning it as service to career pathway, even before we started figuring out like how do we align our language with WIOA language and things like that. We know that national service, volunteer service are all pathways and stepping stones to connecting people to continued education to the workforce goals. But this very particular structured initiative is something that has just really become really prominent, and our work is really just becoming more increasingly aligned with these funding opportunities and whatnot, and that's very, very exciting. Real quick, just want to mention in case anybody is like super not familiar with this, but basically Youth Mental Health Corps is that paid service training and credentials experience, and then moving into behavioral health careers. It addresses several different things, expanding youth mental health support, but also building that workforce. So you can see why this the work that we're doing here is just really it's meeting the need. It needs more promotion. It needs more support. We need more capacity, but it's such a great way for us to, really plug in and be a partner in this work in the state. And then, as I said, there's this new investment from Kaiser to do the same thing. Then, as I said, there's also this other thing that's happening and overlaying all this, which is the announcement of the Service United strategy. This is something that was just launched, I guess it's about a week and a half ago or so, by the National Governors Association. And the new president of the National Governors Association is Governor Wes Moore, who is very, very supportive of service. So that was pretty exciting to see that when that email notice came in. I was very happy. I think I even went straight to Miranda's office and was like, "Did you see this?" And then she had his book on her desk, and she was like, "I love him. I'm rereading his book." And so we were like, "Yay, go Wes. This is good news." And so that is like immediately out the gate, we saw his commitment to national service by seeing this initiative that's being led be announced. And this is basically an opportunity that is going to provide funding for state service commissions, governor's offices, and other partners to develop additional service positions and service pathways. And I will say that we knew a little bit about this being developed a few months ago. I think in a previous meeting, I shared that Kyra had, said, start getting ready. Like there are funders that want to get some funding out there. And really the vibe is regardless of what happens on any federal funding, any sort of federal landscape, service is important. As private funders, we want to get opportunities out to state to make sure that whatever that looks like, that it still exists. And I will give a little bit of a history, like context here, which is we have actually put forth, the commission has, you all have developed policies and legislative concepts for state funding for state core positions. We have not necessarily had those go through. But the idea is that state commissions can run state service core positions that are like identical to national service, but not within the national service funding. And it's a way that they can use private funding or state funding to continue to provide similar opportunities and address needs that maybe don't fit exactly in the focus groups of AmeriCorps, but you can still, sort of provide similar opportunities. And we have pitched that before. There is evidence based with other commissions that works. And that's a bit about what this is based on. And so it's looking to connect service to, same thing, workforce development, apprenticeship, career credentials, employer partnerships, education and economic mobility, those urgent and state and community needs, and that again, maybe don't fit within the focus areas or don't fit within the grant making timeline of some of our other funding sources, and then create that strong civic connection. I will also say just something that I didn't mention that I think is very cool, just going back a little bit to the Kaiser thing, is that that's our first employer partner in this work. And so having that, like that insight and that voice is pretty exciting. Having that perspective of from them of what is needed, and how to grow this is really great. And so just wanted to quickly mention that. Um, a little bit more about that. There's several models to this or focus areas to this. You could get a grant for this Service United Fund that would be like planning for developing a strategy. So a planning grant could be a building grant, which is launching or strengthening models, or like an impact grant, which would be expansion. The grants are of varying sizes. You can see a little bit here about the strategies, creating meaningful paid service and career pathways, addressing priority state community needs, and then strengthening communities and connection. There's a couple of different rounds of application processes. The second one acknowledging that I think there's something like 35 states that are actually going to have a new governor. And that is significant because this needs to be led by the governor's office. This is an initiative that the governor's office is required to submit the interest form. The governor's office has a prominent role in making sure this happens. However, state commissions are considered and are viewed as by this opportunity or within this initiative to be, conveners, to be primary partners in the development and whatnot. But this does require this investment and engagement from the governor's office to ensure that this becomes something that is embedded within the state framework. So there's a lot going on here that we're still learning about. And maybe Amber can talk a little bit more to it as well. And I can put some links in the chat. It's pretty lengthy and I only had so much time, so I didn't want to get too much in it. But I did just want to sort of like mention, like, hitting the ears, yet another opportunity for us to think about. But this is just a really, really exciting opportunity, but it does require very close communication with the governor's office, planning, commitment, and a real strong idea. It requires capacity, and it really requires, making sure that we've got partners at the table and we're thinking about this in a holistic, like broad, way, so that it's sustainable and it's not siloed. We're not doing the same duplications. So why I wanted to cover all of this, I want to point out, as I've said, there's some opportunities here and some things for us to think about. But I wanted to point out, what this could mean for us and how we kind of already have some things that are in place. We've got, as we know, that service to career piece where we did the policy academy. We've got this landscape research and a lot of great things to follow up on there and think about. We've started this youth mental health core program and are doing a lot within that and continuing to build partnerships. We know that there's a lot of opportunity there and communications that we're already having around how we can connect service with further credentials and credit and post-secondary pathways. We're doing that with some of the Youth Mental Health Corps. We're part of HAC's broader, civic engagement strategy. As you know, we just moved to the Community College Workforce Development Department from Office of Workforce Investments and whatnot. And so we've got these things in place, but there's work to do to past that. And so to continue framing this before I answer a question or hand it off to Amber, I want to just kind of go back to an additional kind of context that all of this is going or is all of this overlays against as well, is that, as I mentioned, like HEC is going through a realignment process right now. We shared in the last meeting that actually I don't know, that might not have been last meeting, just through like our various email communications, but the Oregon Department of Employment had made a recommendation that was accepted by the governor's office for most of the WIOA funded stuff to move to the Office of Employment, the Employment Department. So the Office of Workforce Investment, pretty much half of it moved over to the Employment Department. That left OregonServes, some Future Ready, some apprenticeship, and Oregon Youth Works. Julia is now, who was our director of Office of Workforce Investments, is now in a strategy position with the executive team for the HAC. Miranda is now our overall supervisor and deputy director within CCWD. We are now moved within CCWD. The HAC is, continuing to review what this is going to look like, what this alignment is going to look like. We are still figuring out where we fit within CCWD. We're still learning about CCWD. They're still learning about us. There's a lot of questions on where we fit in, both within that department and the broader agency. The priorities of the HEC realignment you can see here. And then if you think about then with our service career opportunities and what we're doing, I think that there's a really, strong position for us to hold for advancing some of the outcomes that HEC is trying to achieve through this realignment. But most of you who have been around for a while, you know that the optics, the issue here has always been really getting, I think, both our state agency and others to really see how valuable we are, where we do play a role in these things, elevating our role both within our state agency, but within the legislature as, a solution for advancing some of these initiatives and some of these goals. And that continues, that continues to be, something that we've talked about that's been a little bit of a pain point for us as a commission, or, or a little bit of attention for us, is sometimes feeling like we find out about initiatives and then we're later saying, wait, like we should be part of this. So I think what we're kind of, right now considering is, how can we get ahead of this? How can we take all of this really great stuff that we have and all of these opportunities happening and really get ahead of this, really use this to like launch, us a lot further, to really be more prominent, to be, a bigger priority within these things, to be a stronger partner within these things and really be seen as a solution to some of these things. And we've got some really great resources. I've just shared these funding opportunities. And then we've got this report that Amber is going to give us, which is such an amazing resource and gives us so much to work with. And so I think that that's really kind of my goal of having covered this, is in pitching and sharing all of these different things going on, is to really say, like, like, where can we like really just advance this to the next level and grab this momentum? Because while I think it's a little bit of like, change is hard with the HEC realignment, it is also, in my opinion, like the perfect opportunity to really, put us out there and really be a strong voice on where we fit in with all of this. This is exactly, I think, kind of the moment where things are being decided and reviewed and thought about and analyzed for, assets and benefits. And I think that this is a really strong place for us to like make it known and get ahead and really share some of our innovative strategies. So that's a bit of, kind of the, I guess, premise that I want you all to think about and consider as we move into hearing more from Amber. And just as a little bit of a wrap up too, um, when we did this is a bit of what we were thinking of, like how can we create those stronger pathways? What are the barriers? What kind of opportunities exist, what's needed, and where should we focus next? And this is just really timely, And so, um, a few things just to think about as we kind of move on with this meeting is just our priorities, where you see the greatest opportunities, what role you think we should play, what should we explore, the Serve United Fund and when, how can we strategically utilize that opportunity? And then where do we fit in with the HEC alignment? I think that, and I'm gonna stop sharing. I think that the other thing I would say here is that I would really want to hear from you kind of after all of this, and it may not be in this meeting, but in a follow-up of um, what also would be a good format for you all to weigh in? Like, would you like us to pull like a work group together or a focus group or get on a, call? I think that, you know, you all are a huge asset to us. Like there's a lot ahead of us. I think Miranda would probably say or not if I saw her face right now, like, yes, like we are having meetings where we are talking about what to do and where all these different programs can align and the benefits. And so like, yes, like we want to hear from you on like, what where to go with this and where you think our strengths are and how you might want to be involved. And so overall, as I said, there's just a lot of really cool stuff to happen, but it does require some real strategy. And so it's exciting, but yeah, it's not necessarily chill, but it's exciting. And I will just leave it with that and see if you have any questions before we move on. It's a lot. It's like too much to go into great detail here, but hopefully that gave you a good primer.
Definitely not chill. Appreciate it though, Carrie. I see Susan unmuted. I was about to ask, does anyone have any comments, questions, curiosities?
Well, I had a comment. First, this is really exciting, and I think super timely. All of the funding, the federal funding that's finally been pushed out in 2026 from Department of Labor and Education has all been around every single topic that you have touched on, from America's talent strategy, which is, the driver of our federal priorities that drive funding. And I work with a lot of community colleges around the state and the nation that have to have partners for work-based learning, for apprenticeships, for um, programs that you are providing. So I think that if there's a way to get in front of the community college leaders through CCWD, which now you have a strong partnership with, that they need to build relationships with OregonServes. And I think you're positioned really strongly to build those relationships now, because part of the problem for them to get those federal dollars is the dollars come out and then the grants due in 30 days. And so they can't wait until the funding comes out to start a conversation. They have to start these conversations right now to be able to apply for a grant that comes out next May. So I think, just tooting your horn within the framework that you have right now is going to be really powerful. And I feel like it seems like the community college presidents get together in the fall. Maybe it's like August, September. I don't know if it's through CCWD or Oregon Community College Association, but that would be a great group to get in front of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I should actually mention that Dr. Latrice and I actually had lunch a few weeks ago, and there's some follow-up, some great conversation and some great insights that she gave me, and some follow-up that I'm doing with her too, with some of our one-pagers and other things that we're pulling together about the work that we do. And there's going to be some follow-up where, yeah, she's helping open some doors for follow-up conversations, because I will be really frank with you. We get a lot of interest for a lot of our programming and our grants, but there is a lot of hesitancy from partners right now or potential partners right now because of their own impacts that they're seeing and around losing funding from different types of state or federal grants or capacity and things like that. And so the interest is there. The infrastructure sometimes it needs a little bit more support or just people are a little risk averse around it, and especially around funding cliffs, which is why I think the Service United thing is like so exciting too, that there's a potential for like, no, there's continued interest to like keep these things afloat, but there's just work to be done in communication. So I did just want to mention that and share how great that's been to get that support. And I welcome anybody else that would love to have, a conversation about this and talk about some of that stuff. It's so helpful. And so yeah, I really appreciate it. And I do think that it's really, for me, I think it's interesting to be moved into CCWD. I think there's natural alignment there. So it's kind of cool.
Other comments, questions for Carrie? I know that one of the questions I have for you, Carrie, lots of great updates, lots of moving parts. How can we help you in this moment in time, other than just absorbing a lot of this great information and processing it and starting to brainstorm? Anything you need from the commission at the moment for support?
You know, I want to follow up on that because, and I want to kind of talk with Miranda about that too, about like, is there something we could do around, having like a follow-up meeting and like, that has a little bit more like in-depth information and then, do a little bit more of like focus grouping on some of this or, thinking, I feel like, Miranda, I don't want to talk to you on behalf of you, but I feel like, like we could provide some additional opportunity to hear more directly around like, thoughts on like this alignment or like really intentional like partnership building and participation on some of the things around the Service United Fund and stuff that Amber is going to mention. So I think I don't know, Miranda, if you want to add on to that, but I think there's follow-up to be had for sure.
There's a lot of follow-up. I think that maybe in the near future, it might be helpful for you and Madeline to present a little bit more details about our youth mental health core portfolio. I think that the conversation with Amber today about the project she did for us on the service career pathways is going to be very educational. And I would love to have a little work group with everybody to be able to hear your reflections on that, because what we learned from Amber today, I don't think is just going to guide the OregonServes work. I think that's going to guide our bigger picture work that we're doing. So it would be really wonderful to have you all as thought partners as we're trying to figure out our pathway forward, not just with the OregonServes, but also like our bigger portfolio of grantees. I would also say, just to add on to what Carrie said about the portfolio itself, there is a lot of hesitancy. We're not getting really high quality, and a high volume of grant applications for the opportunities. So there's been a lot of, number one, attrition in our portfolio, period, but then also we need to work on a more effective outreach strategy to let people know what opportunities are out there. Like we're working on an RFA right now for another round of planning grants. We just have a lot going on that I feel like we could use some thought partnership from the commission that would be helpful to help guide us.
Gotcha. What I heard is that input is going to be needed and welcomed, but give you all a second to figure out what model and method that might be received best in, and truly appreciate everyone's work behind the scenes, Miranda, Carrie, Alicia now, but also Kelly. I know that our team has shrinked significantly. You mentioned outreach. We had that position cut completely, right? So I know that y'all are doing more than your fair share of the work and doing a great job of doing it. So thank you for that. And we'll just we'll keep an ear out for that opportunity for input in the future. Because I know my gears are already turning. I'm like, oh, this would be a great idea, and I need to like write this down before I forget it. So we will stay tuned for all of that. For the interest of time, let's go ahead and shift over to our guest presentation. And then for the sake of time and then to keep flow going, if you have a question or comment during the presentation, I would welcome folks to put it in the chat and perhaps we can answer them all at the end, but that way we can run through a good flow. But I'll pass the floor over to Amber, who will give us our presentation. The floor is all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you. You should be able to see my screen. Perfect. Just a little bit of framing. So I think in introduction, I mentioned that I am doing this under a small consulting contract. I want to give you a little broader frame to the perspective I bring to this work. So I am with America's Service Commissions, who Daniel, you mentioned earlier, as the Ask Innovation Fellow. And as a part of that work, I work pretty much full-time supporting the Youth Mental Health Corps across the country. So that development of service to career pathways for all of the states that are part of the Youth Mental Health Corps. I also touch the service to career framework development for the network and some of the National Governors Association work. And am a two-time commission executive director. So I'm very close to Oregon. I live in Olympia, Washington, and have the perspective of being both within a state government commission and a nonprofit commission in Nevada. So there are spaces where I may share input and you're going to be like, this isn't exactly Oregon. It's me trying to piece some of the different hats of knowledge that I wear with the project. I take maybe one or two small projects a year to dive deeper into a state. And Carrie and I had been talking about this for a while. And so that's what we did with the Service to Career Framework. It was a very quick project, broad scope of what was possible to do. And I'm going to just cover some high level components that I hope will give you some perspectives on what might this look like next step for you all. So we'll cover a summary of findings, again, just very high level, what we saw in a literature review and interviews in terms of evidence across some priority sectors that Carrie identified for us, where we think there are some challenges and opportunities. In particular, there were some systems challenges that came up in the interviews, but also in the research review, and where I think Oregon has a lot of potential to lead, in part because of the commission's placement within HEC and some of the work that HEC is doing, recognizing there's a full realignment. And then where we need your support, where I think in the report, it felt like commission action and agency action could actually advance OregonServes efforts, and then some discussion for us to think about what that actually looks like. So we prioritized our review around behavioral health, clean energy, and then actually education, but ended up landing in early childhood education in part because we're reframing it around entry-level careers versus ones that require bachelors, although the service to career pathways includes all of those spectrums, but that was one of the frames of the step project. We saw within behavioral health that there is significant unmet needs, and in fact, full counties not necessarily being served if you're looking at a clinical workforce. We saw large job growth predictions related to clean energy, but not necessarily a plan for transitioning people working in related fields that were going to be ending in terms of the job possibilities. And then we saw in general just wage issues around what does early entry look like within early childhood education, and where is it a career pathway versus a job placement that may not be sustainable. Oregon's doing a lot of work in this space, so just take that with a grain of salt. Across all of the different reports, we saw that many of the entry-level positions really have low wages and underinvestment in what those credentialing pathways can look like, but also what happens once someone enters them. So you start with a low wage, you have a credential that may not be stackable and may actually be a dead-end credential. And so how is that pathway mapping connecting across those systems? In a number of spaces when we spoke to people about the workforce, a very small number of interviews, so don't let this be exaggerated, but when we spoke to people about what is working well within their system, a lot of siloing or saying like, I own this part, but that person owns this part. How do we figure out how to work together? We heard that through interviews, and we saw it through some of the workforce reports where it said, well, behavioral health is doing this, but there's actually 3 different agencies working in the same space, and they may not all be working collaboratively, or people weren't sure. From a service lens, I think one of the largest structural gaps is that we can't actually yet show what happens with individuals when they serve post-service. Like, what are the actual alumni outcomes, and not from the perspective of what Service Year Alliance does for a service year survey, or even from the perspective of what youth mental health core states do from a career capital development survey, because both of those exist, but how does it link into state longitudinal data systems and the different ways that workforce decisions get made? So with that, we really think part of what the premise of the report is that with intentional design, service can link those components, and OregonServes can help lead the linking of some of those components. Service definitely connects across those different sectors. So education, workforce, multiple other need areas, but isn't always seen as a partner at the table and isn't always leveraged as one funding tool or career development approach strategy. So what I mean by that is sometimes service links within high school and CTE programming as a pathway for exposure and engagement, and then continues through actual work-based learning and more intentional work-based learning and job exposure pathways, such as AmeriCorps and registered apprenticeship alignment, those types of things. We also see that service is often seen as a way to close a gap in a workforce shortage, but not necessarily a gap, and provide that future pipeline for employment. So making sure that those are linked more closely. And then it felt like Oregon had a lot of potential to really invest in lived experience. You have some really neat things coming out of your Oregon Health Authority and other possible credentials that aren't built entirely on higher ed, but partner with higher ed and community college systems for that beginning entry, and just valuing that lived experience. So in doing some of the review of just workforce needs, current service programming footprint, because we did analyze and look at the different AmeriCorps programs currently in OregonServes portfolio. I also asked to look at the executive order for OregonServes and the current staffing plan. And it feels like you have a really good asset in OregonServes, but it is definitely under-resourced to scale and lead some of these types of initiatives. You all know this, like, it's embedded in the state government. It's in HEC's office. It may not be an office of workforce investments anymore. I think some of that has shifted. It has a cross-sector mandate around utilizing service as a strategy that can link to workforce. But service to career as a process isn't really written into the commission's strategy fully, or budgeted, because it takes additional resources to support this budget-wise. You have a really strong team, and I was impressed with reviewing the AmeriCorps portfolio and mapping it across some dimensions of service to career. But you don't have someone who is specifically targeted for TT and A for the field, which, if you want robust development of service to career pathways, you're going to need some additional infrastructure there. You're also going to need that if you're looking at the Service United Fund, or even just the growth and expansion of youth mental health core. It felt like the commission is really well positioned to be convening at different levels on this, but there wasn't a whole lot of capacity for what happens after those meetings, and where is Carrie and her team supported in that follow through. Because you all know what it's like to be in back-to-back meetings, and then you have this long list of things to do, and that infrastructure didn't look like it fully existed within the commission. And most of these initiatives include private funding. And so working through how the commission actually engages with philanthropic funding, and starts to diversify its engagement within its work of not just AmeriCorps federal funding, but also state funding, some of the workforce funding. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So with that, the opportunity is, like, how do we actually position OregonServes as a more lead convener, or positionally appropriate within a table of conveners, right? You have a lot of organizations and agencies within Oregon that saw themselves in their comments as, we are the lead convener. Well, if you're all the lead convener, but you're not all in the same room, how do we close that gap? And so I think Oregon has an opportunity to do that. They have less of an individual focus area purpose and more of a how do we actually leverage these resources to help you all meet your needs. Carrie already mentioned this, but certainly the service to career and the service pathways work of OregonServes is linked with the governor's priorities and some of the NGA Service to Career Academy. She mentioned Kaiser Permanente's new $10 million investment into the Youth Mental Health Corps. So that is 10 million over 5 years, eventually to expand to all 9 of their states. That's 9 states that some are part of the Youth Mental Health Corps and some are not. It should not be missed that Oregon is one of the first 3 states they're working on. So it's California, Maryland, and Oregon. So those are the first 3 states. And then also that you have that momentum. It also looked on reviewing things like the commission has a really strong grant making and compliance core. And so those are in place, which is part of what will give the commission the ability to move some of these initiatives forward. But remember, you can't move the initiatives forward on the same staff that are keeping the compliance and grant making pieces in place and solid. So I wanted to take us from kind of that larger overview to what it actually means when we think through the challenge to the opportunity. So low wages wasn't just a challenge within the entry-level workforce career paths or some of those first jobs post-service. It's also reflected in service positions as a whole and how we're thinking through the living allowance adequacy and what members earn while they're in service. I would say when we talk through living allowance adequacy, we're talking the actual living allowance or the stipend, but also what wraparound supports a state and programs might provide. Some of the credentials that don't recognize lived experience, I think we compare those with credential recognition and post-secondary service credit. And so making sure that any pathway is stackable. And that there is no dead end like positioning that we're preparing members for when we think through the service to career pathway that we're designing. I think I already mentioned system fragmentation, just how often that came up and the outcome data. So when we looked at service to career pathways in the report, we looked at it from 2 different tiers. We looked at program dimensions and how service to career development is structured. So what's the pathway design? What's the work-based continuum? Is it a credential of quality? We're not talking about just training our members, but a credential of quality. Does the program or a partner of the program have staff career coaching? Right. So you need to be able to coach towards career goals. You need to be able to do competency and skills-based assessments on what you're training people on. It's not just here, we've done this training, check done. Wraparound and accessibility supports, placement and transition support. So like what happens post-service? This is more than just doing AmeriCorps life after AmeriCorps training. This is about employer partnerships, job placements, or higher ed access. Like whether you're helping someone transition to a job or you're helping them transition into continued education, both fit within the service to career sort of framework. But there are also standards at the commission level that need to be in place. So there's grant making standards around how you value and score related to the service to career pathways, the credentials and the member support and wraparound supports that a program provides. Those all can be determined by the commission. They can decide where those standards need to land. This framework is being used at a national level, just so you know, the employer partnerships feels like a space where commissions can work with their other state partners and really leverage those employer partnerships, similar to how Kaiser will be leveraging that with the Youth Mental Health Corps and the state commissions who are leading that effort. But so we looked at the programs across all of these standards. And we saw that I think Madeline has been doing a phenomenal job of coaching programs on how to build in some service to career attributes. And in fact, saw a number of your planning grants really where the model has the potential to work really well. And so I think United We Heal and the planning grant they were doing that connects to the Youth Mental Health Corps has a ton of potential to be a national proof point, much like the other ones like Power Corps, Philadelphia, Civic Works, and then just different models that we're seeing throughout the youth mental health core. And so we know that it can work, and often when it's structured across in these ways, we see additional investment. But where it felt like there might be some more support needed for OregonServes to be able to advance this work, it felt like thinking through the strategic approach and the framing and how this work starts to connect to other work that the state is leading. So in particular, how does OregonServes get integrated into broader workforce strategy conversations? I think that's a really good question to be asked both within HEC, because there's a lot of workforce and youth programming that's happening within HEC where the commission may not actually be directly integrated, and there's potential there. There's also potential for how the commission shows up for all of the workforce strategies that are being led by other agencies like the health. I always want to call it the state health department, which is the wrong word for you all, but the state level health organization. A number of your state agencies are actually moving forward with workforce pathways where service could uniquely connect to it.
The Oregon Health Authority.
Thank you. I'm like, why can't I come up with it? Thank you, Carrie. Oregon Health
We had
Authority.
this conversation yesterday too. I know it's hard to remember.
But also thinking through, like, I heard on this call a number of highlights around where HEC is going through consolidation and reorganization, and how do you ensure that it doesn't shrink in the role that OregonServes actually can and should be playing across all these cross-sector initiatives. There's a lot of potential when commission work links directly with multiple state agencies and isn't limited by the state agency that it sits in, or its position within the governor's office hierarchy. Trying to go quick because I know we were running behind. So in the report, I flagged a couple places that I think have potential for some policy action. I think thinking through, like I said, the living allowance adequacy and where that might be a state decision package, where it might be linking members with other support systems that the state already offers to individuals with limited resources. That living allowance adequacy is one level. Post-secondary service credit, some states are actually moving forward, and a number of service programs are moving forward with credit for prior learning, both based off of a service model and or directly linked to a credential that's part of this work. And then there were some potentials around some other initiatives you all are building, such as just in clean energy, a fellows program that I think the state's been pursuing. And then the Oregon Health Authority comes up again because of their peer credential that values lived experience as early entry and has the potential to directly link to the youth mental health core work that Serve Oregon is already doing. OregonServes. I always try and call you the wrong thing. OregonServes. When we looked at the different reports, there is very little braided funding going on, and there's a ton of potential. So I heard from state funded programs, we don't have capacity to grow. We don't necessarily have money to sustain our current existing program footprint, but we're not braiding funds across, say, federal service funding and other workforce funding. And so just thinking through how you braid it to be able to sustain existing programs and grow new programs is an opportunity. In particular, I named some key streams that we see commonly show up or that came up in some of the searches for Oregon, where we see people braiding funding to have more slots on the ground of higher quality service experiences, meaning the benefits are better, the member development is better, and the program partners are actually resourced to do stronger support and supervision. And so with living allowance adequacy, we looked at the current range of the AmeriCorps living allowance by term type. And we compared that both to the MIT living wage by county and then minimum wage within Oregon. And there's definitely a gap there no matter what. All counties, if you were at them like you're going to be below living wage. There's some nuance to that because you actually have the ability to do other supports for members. And because of a policy, and I'm going to do this wrong, Mary, but I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, AmeriCorps basically released a policy that allows you to do other wraparound services or benefits to your members and not have that counted in the living allowance, right? Nod your head. Okay, good. Making sure I'm not getting this wrong. I don't have to worry about compliance anymore. And Oregon is one of those states that currently offers one commission level wraparound according to Ask's landscape survey, and programs offer some other wraparound services. This living allowance adequacy piece is the biggest push-pull you're going to see if you all want to braid workforce funds. You got to reach certain levels of wage for them to consider blending those funds. So it's not just a value statement, it's also where other federal and state grants have said we're going to set a standard and you need to meet it. And that can't all be on the back of the grantee partners. There has to be some other sources for that. I think I covered these already, so I'm going to keep going because you might have questions. I did want to flag just some possibilities for you all as you're thinking through next steps. And this one in particular came up when with Ask, we talked about the Service United Fund and where we think there's some potential. Iowa did an executive order, and it actually had state agencies as a whole work together to look at the service, growing new service corps and volunteer programming. And I think you could do that and actually link it to your service to career strategies and maybe create a convening table that the commission could be a part of. We mentioned prior credit for learning already. I just wanted, I don't remember that I saw that happening in Oregon programs, but Carrie, correct me if I'm just forgetting. If you know. Okay. Y'all have a really good foundation for this. You have a number of policies that I was able to see. But in the PowerPoint, I gave 2 examples of where we're seeing that be leveraged, of which I mentioned earlier, in case you wanted more information. But this is an area you should definitely be looking at for the youth mental health core work that you're leading in your state. And then Carrie was telling me you guys have done some great work already. In exempting taxes on the Siegel Education Award, but that you also had goals around doing that around the living allowance. And that might be a really good first step to start moving on the living allowance adequacy issue. So my recommendations for you is that you partner with Carrie and her team on strategic thinking and that position of OregonServes within the WIOA state plan. And broader workforce conversations, that you prioritize 1 or 2 areas to actually do some real convening and put some resources behind that convening. I, in particular, flagged some of the behavioral health stuff, but I think you have a bunch of high priority opportunities you could build based off of your current service footprint. You're going to want to identify a funding vision. And I think, Miranda, this is probably for you, but I was surprised how many different sources are funding, including state sources, different strategies that aren't all linked together. And maybe there's an opportunity to map that within your state and then continue to be the champions that you are. Carrie, I imagine I forgot something, but like what did I not say that you were hoping I would say?
I think you said lots of great stuff. I mean, there's so many different things going on and places to for us to explore. I think some of it is within operations of the commission and within our own like policy and processes. But and some of it is within policy and legislation. It's more external changes. So I appreciate that you that you did a varied approach to that. And I can send out the link for the entire report to everyone. But as I said, like we want to, dig deeper into some of these things and questions with you all in a follow-up. This was just sort of like an overview primer. But yeah, I think you covered everything. Something that I want to mention, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this though. What is kind of sitting in my head is that, or I'm kind of ruminating on, is that this is an opportunity, especially with like the Service United Fund, for other programs, both within the hack and externally, to come together, to braid things together, to implement and develop to develop and implement an approach together. And so I think I want to elevate that idea because I want people like Greg and Dr. Latrissa and others to really think about like this isn't like just how do you support, like this is something like you could be a part of, like this is something that we'd all be like partners within to come together and think about what to do with this and benefit from this, both with like how we might have a scaffolded approach within. I keep wanting to say OE, but now it's CCWD. We don't have like a new cool name for our team, y'all. So like maybe that's another follow-up action. It's like a naming contest, but both like how we might, externally or internally have like multiple recipients of these funds and these different things within our teams here that could benefit, Oregon Youth Works and then like this and then OregonServes and like da da da. But also like as program partners, like I envision that you are like also part of this and whatnot. And so I don't know if Amber, if like that's something you want to elaborate on or like correct me if I'm wrong, but that it isn't meant to just there's kind of a broader way to use these funds, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's about applying service as a strategy across multiple approaches versus siloing a youth work program, a workforce program, and a service program. They're not like that. Combining them or braiding them or figuring out collaborative ways for all of them isn't always going to work. Like, don't lose your mission focus, but the conversation should take place. I think one of the things you're going to have to grapple with, Carrie, and you all as the commission, and I think it relates to the service credits and prior learning comment in the chat, is that so many of the ways this happens really are state decisions. So sometimes within the AmeriCorps world, we're always like, well, it's the Fed's fault, right? Like they made this decision. Well, actually, no. In so many spaces, these are state decisions. How you treat apprenticeships, how you figure out WIOA funding, where prior credit happens, like those are all local. There's local levels, and likely there's a state policy depending on your state around that. If you have an association of, say, community colleges or higher ed institutions, there's some variation, but there's also some solid alignment that gets determined at the state, and you have to navigate that, which is part of why I think your team needs someone who is doing TT&A, but not just from the lens of how do you do compliance with an AmeriCorps or have a high quality AmeriCorps program. How do you do TT&A in these specialized areas?
Mm.
So high level view, really long report. I think I lost my eyeballs trying to review it because there was just stuff, lots of stuff. But you all are doing some really cool stuff and your programs are doing some cool stuff. So how do you elevate that and connect those dots?
Yeah, and I think in what I was just bringing about is that, there's a whole national service network and family that's not just our grantees, but also, our other partners and our other service partners and programs within the state, for us to really think about like braiding all this together and how some of the things that we may advance would not just be to benefit our programs, but generally overall, just that entire fabric of this.
Yeah. So many of the philanthropic partners are going to be focused on opportunity youth. And I think states are also, however, focused on what does reskilling look like? What does AI disruption mean? How, those are things that I think are right now more cutting edge and not as reflected in some of the works and the approaches that states are doing. So you could also lead the field on that.
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions?
I just want to give Amber lots of kudos. You're very good at what you do. The presentation itself, like you saw a lot of information and put it in a way that both informs but also inspires. So thank you so much for that. I can't wait to read the full report. And like I said, my gears are turning. Like I'm feeling inspired. And I love the terminology that you used where braiding really is the key word. I agree with you that Oregon is doing really great things, a little too much in silo. And we've talked about this on the commission, but like, how do we bring things together? That might be our role to be the convener to braid all of these things together because we know that our capacity is a little bit limited as well. But I love this conversation that we're having. And Oregon seems to be on Oregon loves its councils right now. I think we're like on its I don't know what number, but the Prosperity Council just gave their report on behalf of the governor's office. I'm thinking, what does it look like to have a service council hosted by the governor's office that convenes agencies cross agency and then community partners as well? But we're leading that in some capacity, right? But there's so many great ideas, and thank you for putting it like all in one place so that we're not a little lost in this work with a lot of moving parts. And there's a lot of great opportunity. Funding is being opened in ways that hasn't been before. So really, really exciting stuff. Does anyone have any other questions or comments for Amber, for Carrie, or in relation to what we just learned? I looked at the chat and it looks like we're caught up in the chat.
I would just add, Daniel, I appreciate what you said, and of course, this is great work. I will look forward to reading the report as well. I think you're right on when you're saying that a convener is needed, right? A convener is needed. So we're all, many good intentioned folks around here in Oregon trying to do all kinds of things, pretty much many times in our own worlds, right? So in the private and the independent colleges, they're got our own alliance doing things, and different institutions are doing prior learning credit differently depending on their accreditation and what they're doing. And so that's not standard. And community colleges, we work with them on different specific things, but not as generally as perhaps that we should, right? So our president, I was going to say, at our college here that's just started, she had in Ohio, they had an interesting partnership with privates and community colleges that was more broadly knitted together, which we don't really have here. We have we have partners in community colleges, but we don't really, we're sort of like in different countries, we're like, you're over here and we're over here, and then you have our public institution as well. So yeah, there is definitely, we're not the ones, here sitting in the institutions that can do it, right? So we need somebody like OregonServes or a commission, a service commission or someone to actually help, because everybody's out there kind of doing their own thing, right? In these education spaces anyway, and trying to work together, but I don't know how successful we always are in doing that.
It's all about bringing the right people together. There's a lot of people who want to do good work, even if the system's silo. Anyway, Daniel, thank you for letting me present. And if I can answer more questions, always happy to do so. I'm not that far away from y'all in Olympia, Washington, so it's easy.
Oh, super cool.
I just wanted to comment on this too, because I do think the convening part is really important. I think the other thing that I see working in like the volunteer landscape and the workforce development landscape, where we're trying to always merge those two things, is we run in, just like the commission, the commission is running into staff capacity, so do organizations. So there's a huge desire to have apprenticeships. Like we're working really hard to get some in our like carpentry space, but they lack the staffing to support. And so I also saw this when I was working with Clackamas County in social services, where we really needed to have masters in social work supervise, but we didn't have enough of those qualifying staff to supervise some of the interns. So I'm just thinking about how can the commission convene, or how can we change some of those qualifications in higher ed, so folks with often 20 or 30 years of career experience can actually be the supervisors of some of these roles.
Yeah, that's actually a really good call out. It's a little bit in the report, but because we're seeing with the Kaiser partnership with the Oregon Health Authority, and the peer credential requires there's a clinical supervision level, but you have a shortage of clinical supervisors. How do you actually make this possible?
Yeah, and at Clackamas County, we were talking for a while, but then lost funding. That if we could actually have like some retired MSWs come back and just do some of the supervision, what would that look like, and how could, like, how could that help ease that pressure? Because the need was there, and it was just, but then it just, we ran into capacity of, well, how do we get those? And, it just had become a lot of issues that just, that idea just, backburnered.
June, the other thing I would leave you to think about with that comment, because I think it's really valuable, is remember that you're not turning every service program into an apprenticeship. It doesn't have to be a registered apprenticeship program. You're looking at a continuum of what the member receives during service. We already know AmeriCorps programs and service programs do a solid job of developing members. The question is, are we doing it in a way that workforce will acknowledge it and value it for hiring or for advancement in the educational system? And so it's linking those, but it's a continuum. Don't push everyone to one end. Let programs figure out what most aligns with their strategy, mission, and capacity.
And I totally agree with that. And I think that we've seen that staffing capacity even on MSW, and a line even carpentry supervisor that would just be doing some of the day-to-day supervision. So it's on both ends.
Carrie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I put just another perspective, kind of yes, anding to what June was just mentioning in the chat. But another thing that just made me think of just now is that, funny enough, because they just moved to a different agency, right? But I think like the WTDB, we're gonna need to like continue to make sure that we have some connections with them and kind of probably circle back with them, because some of the things that Amber has raised or brought to the surface with this report are things that matched things that came out of their Oregon Talent Assessment or Talent Summit work. There was a sort of review of I guess it was a survey and whatnot and research after that summit with partners and employers, and some of the same things that they brought up as pain points are things that are coming up in this report around things like lived experience or other stuff not getting valued as it should or whatnot towards credentialing. So I think there's a chance for us to also, or we should make room to also think about where we might want to further partner and see what kind of resource sharing we could do there as well. Or again, taking advantage of like their connections, not just CCWD's community college connections, but employer connections through WTDB, and getting some of their insights and input on some of these things eventually.
I know your meeting's over, but Carrie, I just want to flag your comment in the chat box. So multiple states, to move this work forward, are having to subsidize host site fees so that host site fee, then they can increase their internal capacity to subsidize. You've seen that in some states where they're basically supplying some of the match for the AmeriCorps grant, but also helping an organization not have to charge an organization to do that. Even in things like service year option. So like the state funded core in Maryland, they're considering that type of support and what it takes for an organization to bring a member in, not just for workforce, not just to meet needs of the community, but to ensure they have the capacity to properly support.
Thank you for that. And thank you for, Carrie. I think that was a really good, your comment was a really good way of summarizing not only the conversation we just had with Amber about this report, but this entire meeting in general. I think I can speak for myself, but I'm leaving this meeting with a lot of insights and a lot of ideas. And I hope you all are excited about this momentum that I'm feeling is happening. We've been through a phase of where we were like, nobody moved. There's a lot going on and things are shifting. No one moved. Sounds like we're finally moving. So really appreciate our guests today, everyone's attendance, everyone's questions. We are at the end of our meeting, so I want to respect folks' times, but Carrie and team will follow up with any action items or follow-up items that might be needed. But for the moment being, I think it is good to end our meeting today at 1:02. And
yes, thank you so much, Amber.
And just a reminder that we will convene once more. October 9th is our next commission meeting, but there may be an opportunity to connect in one form or another before then. But until then, hope everyone has a great Friday and the good rest of your weekend. We'll see each other later. Ciao.
Thank you, everyone.